Have you ever noticed that beginners often write the same code again and again and again? Just for example, like this. We copy the entire thing, move on, pasting, and it keeps on going. All lines of code. Man, you can see that it's like an infinite lines of code. Now, if I just tell you to change each of these, man, you will become crazy. Now, this is just like around 1,000 subscribers. This is for 1,000 subscribers. Would you really write 1,000 print close bracket parenthesis statements? Of course not. Professional programmers almost never repeat the same code over and over. Instead, they write it once and reuse it whenever needed. The secret strategy behind this is functions. Functions are one of the most important concepts in Python. In fact, almost every real world Python project, whether it's a website, a game, an AI application, or an automation script, relies heavily on functions. So if you want to write cleaner, shorter, and more professional code, you are in the right place. Let's get started with this video, the sixth video of our Python programming series, and you are all welcome to my channel. Before we write in code, let's understand the idea. Imagine you have a calculator, you press a 2 plus 3, which is equals to. 2 plus 3 equals to. The calculator performs all the calculations internally and simply gives you the answer 5. You don't know or you don't need to know how the calculator is working inside. You only care about the result. Functions work in exactly the same manner. You provide some input, the function performs a task and then gives you an output. Think of it like this. You give an input which goes to the function, it gives the output. A function is simply a reusable block of code that performs a specific task. Instead of writing the same instruction multiple times, we put those instructions inside a function and call it whenever we need it. This makes our programs much cleaner and much easier to manage. Why do we need or why do we use functions? Let's see a simple example. Suppose we need to greet 3 people or 3 different people. Without function, you might do it like somewhat like this. Total 8 lines of code. Can you notice something? The same lines are being repeated again and again. Now imagine doing this for 100 people or 1,000 people. Your program would become unnecessarily long, difficult to read, and harder to maintain. Instead of copying the same code repeatedly, we can write it once inside a function and reuse it whenever we want. That's exactly why professional programmers love functions. Functions help us reduce the code duplication, keep programs organized, make debugging easier, improve readability, and save a lot of time. As a program grows larger, using functions become less of a choice and more of a necessity. Now let's create finally our very first function. The basic syntax of a function looks like this. Def greet close bracket parenthesis colon print hello. Okay, let's understand every part of this code. The keyword def tells us that we are defining a function. The keyword greet with the close bracket parenthesis is the name of the function. And the colon is the starting of the code within that function. So we can say that print is the code within that function. Now if I go ahead and run out this code, you would see that there is no output. That's because we haven't called the function yet. If I just go ahead, write greet and close bracket parenthesis, this is called function calling. If I show the output, hello. So now we have successfully created our very first function and have also called it. In the next section of this video, we'll make our functions much more useful by learning how to pass data into them and using parameters and arguments. Our greet function works perfectly, but there's a small problem in it. Right now, it always prints the same message, hello. But what if we want to greet different people? Let's say hello Rahul, hello Priya, and hello Aman. One way to create a separate, like one person would create a separate function for every separate person, just like this one. Okay, let's look like messy because just 4 lines. Okay, it's easy, but it's messy. Let's just do one thing. Let's simplify it. Imagine creating thousands of functions just to change a name. Instead, we make our functions flexible by allowing it to receive data. Here's how we are going to do that. I'll just simply delete each of these, paste the new code. So here, the name is the data and followed by the comma data. Now, how does it work or how should it work? Before that, we need to understand parameters. Notice the word name inside the close bracket parenthesis. This is called a parameter. A parameter is simply a variable that receives data when the function is called. Now let's call this function by giving some name to that name variable. Let's say greet Rahul. If I run it, the output will be hello Rahul as expected. Because now the name is getting substituted by Rahul as we are calling the function. Or to simplify the concept a bit more, I just say that greet name now is equals to greet Rahul. That's it. Therefore, name is equals to Rahul in this case. Let's call it again with someone, let's say Priya. And again someone, let's say Aman. So you can see that still it's 3 lines or let's say 5 lines of code, but it's now much cleaner. Now if I go ahead and run it, the out will be hello Rahul, hello Priya, and hello Aman as we expected. Amazing. We wrote the function only once, but now we can use it for any single name. Now, many students often confuse between these two specific terms, that is, parameters and arguments. Let's just clean up this thing so that you just do not get all these confusions. Let's say we have something, a function like this. Here, name within the close bracket parenthesis in the first line is the parameter. It acts like a placeholder that receives some values. And in the last line of the code that greet within close bracket parenthesis Rahul, that word Rahul within double quotes is the argument. It is simply or it's actually the value that we can pass into the function. A simple way to remember this is that parameter receives the value while arguments supplies the value. Whenever we call a function, the argument gets stored inside the parameter. Like whenever you are packing your bag to go on a trip, you pack your things in a suitcase. Similarly, the suitcase becomes the parameter. In this case, the things inside the suitcase are the arguments, which are only packed whenever we plan for our trips, where trip now becomes the function. Now, in this case, you can see that we have only single parameter, and it is very important to know that functions aren't limited to just one piece of data. They can receive multiple variables. For example, let's create a function that adds 2 numbers, and we will say that there are 2 variables or 2 parameters A and B. Here A is the first parameter, B is the second parameter. Now let's call both of them by giving certain values to them. Say add 10, 20. The output will be 30 as expected. Let's try another example. Let's say at 7 and 15, answer will be 22. The beauty of functions is that the same code works with different inputs. We don't need to rewrite the logic every time. Now that we have learned about parameters and arguments, let's now have a brief transition to the return statements. So far, our functions are doing something very simple. They print the results on the screen. For example, this thing only, it just gives the output 30. This works fine. Actually, perfectly fine, I would say. Perfectly fine. But what if we want to store the answer in a variable or use it in another calculation? Can the print close bracket parenthesis do that? The answer is no. For that, Python provides something much more powerful, the return statement. And that's exactly what we'll be learning in the next section of this video. It might look similar to the print. Now it's time to learn one of the most misunderstood concepts for beginners. What is the difference between print and return? At first glance, they seem to be the same thing because both can show a result. But in reality, they are completely different. Let's take this example only right on the screen. I'll just delete this part so that it becomes much more simpler. The output of this code will be 30. Perfect. Now suppose we want to save this answer inside a variable. I have just modified the thing. Let the variable be result. Now I'll print result. If I go ahead, but first before I show you the output, just think that what you think the output will be. Many beginners expect the output to be like 8 and 8. But the actual output, you'll be shocked to see, will be 8 and none. Now I can say that the program is wrong. It has an error. You'll just paste this code in ChatGPT to ask what's the error. Then ChatGPT will say it's perfectly fine. Then you will say it on Google, Gemini, Claude, everyone said fine. But now you will doubt on yourself. Why is that none printed? Because print close bracket parenthesis only displays the value on the screen. It does not send that value back to the place where the function was called. Since nothing was returned, Python automatically returns a special value called none. That's why the result variable contains none. Now let's use return. Now if I show that the output 8, this time it worked exactly as expected. Why? Because the return statement sends the value back to the caller. Now the returned value gets stored inside the result or inside the variable result. And once it's stored, we can use it anywhere. For example, if I just move on and write this, the output will be 60. Because in this case, the answer is, the value is now stored in the answer. Notice something interesting. The function never printed 30. It returned 30 and then we multiplied it by a 20. Okay, it returned 30, we multiplied by 20. Instead, it returned 30 and then we multiplied it by 2. This is why professional programmers prefer return whenever they need to use the result later. Remember this simple rule that print close bracket parenthesis displays the value while return sends the value back. If you only want to show something to the user, use print. If you want to use that value later in the program, use return. Now let's move on to a very important concept, that is default parameters. Let's go back to our greet function. Calling it like this works perfectly fine. The output will also be perfectly fine. Hello, Rahul. Now, what if we forget to pass a name and we simply just call this? There will be an error because an argument is missing. Because the function was expecting the name argument. We can solve this by giving the parameter a default value, just like this. Now, if we call greet without mentioning the name, it will print hello friend. So that's settled. Again, if we pass a value, let's say hello Rahul or greet Rahul, then it will print hello friend and hello Rahul. So that's an easy thing. Now, we understood that a default parameter is simply a value that Python uses automatically when no argument is provided. Till now, we have passed arguments based on their position. For example, if I say this code snippet, here Rahul goes to name and 17 goes to age. But Python also allows us to pass arguments using the parameter names. These are called keyword parameters, just like this. One line. Notice that the order doesn't matter anymore. Python matches the values using the parameters instead of their positions. Keyword arguments makes your code more readable, especially when a function has many parameters. If I show you the output, it will be as we had expected. Okay? If I just remove this line, also, it's like that. So far, we have learned how to create functions, pass default and keyword arguments. Now, step of this video, we will be building a small student report card generator that uses multiple functions working together, just like a real world Python program. Now that we have learned all the fundamentals of function, let's build a small project. Don't worry, it will be a simple, but it demonstrates how functions work together in a real program. The idea is simply straightforward. We will be creating a program that takes a student's name, takes marks in different subjects, calculates the percentage, assigns a grade, and displays a report card. Instead of writing everything in one long block of code, we will divide the program into small functions. This makes the program cleaner, easier to understand, and much easier to modify in the function. So let's begin by creating the function to calculate the percentage. Let's understand this. The function receives a list called marks, and if you don't know what are lists, I have already explained them in my previous videos, but in detail, I will be explaining in, I guess, the next or the very next video after the next video. Like within 2 or 3 videos only, I'll be explaining what are lists, tuples, sets, and other things. So the sum function adds all the marks together. The len function tells us how many subjects are present. By dividing the total marks by the number of subjects, we get the percentage as we would be expected. Simple and reusable. Now let's create the function to calculate the grades. Boom. This is just like the slab-based programming in Java if you have already learned Java. This function receives the percentage and returns the appropriate grade. Notice something very important. We are using return in this case and not print because we want to send the grade back to another function. Now let's create the main report function. Boom. Now this function is where everything comes together. Inside this function, first we call the calculate percentage. The return percentage gets stored inside the variable percentage. Then we pass that percentage into another function called the calculate grade. Finally, we display the report card. Notice how one function is calling another function. This is exactly how large Python applications in real world problems are built. So you can say that you are also one of the small entrepreneurs who are planning to build their real world applications in this AI era, starting from the basics. So now let's call these variables, or sorry, these functions. And by, let's say, for a student, Rahul, the marks are like this. This is what we call a list. I will just mention it over here that this is a list about which we will learn later in this course. Now let's see what the output of this 34 lines of code will look like. Though I would say that it's not 34 lines, if I just shorten the briefs and everything just in order, I have just done that to make the program clear. Just let's keep it this. Student Rahul, percentage is 92.8 and grade is A. Our program is working perfectly fine. In just a few functions, we have built a complete mini application. Imagine if we want to generate report cards for hundreds of students. We don't need to write anything. We simply call the function again with a different data. That's the true power of functions. Before we end this lesson, let's quickly look at two common mistakes that almost every programmer, or I would say every beginner programmer, makes. First off is forgetting the parentheses. They just call it like greed. Well, it's not like greed. The correct thing is putting the parentheses. Okay? So without the parentheses, it will show an error. So always remember that writing the function name only refers to the function, adding parentheses actually executes it. The confusion between the second mistake is that the confusion between the print and the return statement. We do not do this. It's wrong. Instead, we do simply this. This is the correct thing. So use print when we need to display something and return when we need to use that value somewhere else in our program. This small mistake is one of the most important concepts in Python. Congratulations, you have learned one of the most important building blocks of Python programming. Today we have almost covered what functions are, what we use functions in Python for, creating and calling of functions, parameters and arguments, return arguments, building a mini project using multiple functions. From now on, whenever you notice yourself writing the same code more than once, stop and ask yourself, can I turn this thing into a function? It's exactly how professional developers think. In the next video, we'll be exploring another essential concept, that is the variable scope. You will learn local variables, global variables, the global keywords, how Python decides which variable to use. Understanding the variable scope will help you avoid many common bugs and write much more reliable Python code. If you enjoyed this lesson, make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and try modifying today's projects on your own. For example, add more grades, include the total marks, or even calculate the highest scoring subject. Thanks for watching this video. I'll be seeing you in the next video. Happy coding.